first, I'd like you to hear from her this recent video as she speaks about what inspired her from the very beginning.
As an intern, I admitted a 16-year-old girl, and the diagnosis we made was primary pulmonary hypertension. I went to the Harrison textbook of medicine, and I looked up what we knew about primary pulmonary hypertension, and there were about 2 lines, and it said there was nothing you could do, and generally you die within several years after diagnosis. And I went home that night because I wasn't on call, and I came in the next morning, and she had died overnight. I was just struck by, these are children that are going to die, and I started reading what was known, and in fact, even though adults may live several years, it appeared, at least from looking at the pathology studies by the Valiant boards, that children, even if they only had a lot of immediate hypertrophy and had a very vasoreactive bed, the vast majority of them, more than 90%, died, and they died only with grade 1.
Thus began the exceptional career of an extraordinary physician and researcher. As Dr. Stuart Rich put it, she was a champion of the pediatric patient. When it came to the kids, she would never take no for an answer. For her, it was all about the children, their need to breathe and have fun. She dedicated her life to the fight against pulmonary hypertension. And those of us who have in some way been touched by this terrible disease will be forever deeply indebted to her. Robyn was a pediatric cardiologist who at once could be described as tenacious, brilliant, stubborn, visionary, and sometimes intimidating, but deeply loving and caring. And of course, she had a special spot in her heart for the children stricken with pulmonary hypertension. She was a tireless investigator who was instrumental from the beginning in advancing epoprostenol as one of the first effective therapies for treating PH. Ultimately, she directed, participated, and advised in dozens of clinical trials that shaped the course of treatments for this disease for years to come. Over her 30-plus year career, she published over 1,800 peer-reviewed articles, which averages out to about 60 per year or 5 per month. It's little wonder that her prodigious body of work is one of the most cited in medical literature today concerning pulmonary hypertension. And if that in itself wouldn't have been a full career at the same time, she was a world-class physician, treating children around the world. Here you see her with a beautiful young patient named Malene Fisher, daughter of my good friend, Jerry Fisher, the president of the European PHA. She literally followed thousands of patients, and even though she was a pediatrician, you never outgrew Robyn. You would encounter adults in her waiting room that only achieved that status due to her marvelous care. Ladies and gentlemen, the worst words that a father could hear would be, your daughter now has a terminal illness. She has less than a year to live. I didn't know it at the time, but the best words after that, which I heard in 1994, were referring you to Dr. Robyn Barst at Columbia Presbyterian. Robyn was always accessible to us. She was to so many other parents around the world as well. She could be reached anytime during the day or night. Once we had to reach her and we called her cell and we woke her up. She was in Australia, working on a center down there. She advised the local treating physician what needed to be done, and once again, we were calm. Ladies and gentlemen, I credit Robyn Barst directly with giving me 15 extra years, precious years, with my daughter Megan. There is no doubt in my mind that when Robyn passed away this April, the first hug she got was from my daughter Megan when she got there. She was every bit as accessible as a teacher, mentor, and colleague. She served as a full-time professor of medicine at Columbia's College of Physicians and Surgeons. She started and directed Columbia's PH Center. She played a key role in establishing PH treatment centers around the world, from Tokyo to London, Australia to Riyadh, just to name a few. At the same time, she led the PHA Scientific Leadership Committee, served on the PHA Board of Trustees for over a decade, and chaired countless committees and organizations focused on the struggle against pulmonary hypertension. Yet while caring for thousands of patients, training numbers of young physicians, writing thousands of peer-reviewed articles, and conducting groundbreaking research in this fight, she found time to be a loving husband to Sam for 32 years, and mother to Lindsay and Nomi, her two daughters, who each have gone on to be successful in life as an attorney and a physician. Thankfully, she also had a grandson, Tobias, to keep her attention in the final years of her life. Even as she struggled for her life, she remained to the very end in a struggle against pulmonary hypertension.
It's very frustrating to know that we have therapies available, but we're probably not treating the children optimally. We're not sure of the right doses to treat children. We're not sure of long-term safety with children. And even though there are a number of similarities between children and adults with pulmonary hypertension, there are differences. What we need is to increase our research, both in basic science and clinically, with children with pulmonary hypertension, if we want to achieve the improvements that we've seen with adult pulmonary hypertension. It's for all of these reasons that we established a pediatric research fund to raise money for the research of children solely, and also to improve and increase awareness of pulmonary hypertension in children, to allow us to educate pediatricians and pediatric cardiologists more about how we need to identify these children so we can treat them.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the final few days of Robyn's life, I was deeply privileged to be able to go to her home where she was in hospice, passing from cancer, to get to say goodbye to her. And as I sat there bedside, holding her hand, she drifted in and out of lucidity. But when she was clear, she spoke very clearly about the fight against pulmonary hypertension and fighting to save the children, which was her life. And she asked me to promise that we at PHA, the Pulmonary Hypertension Association, would remain in that